That really was. Thank you very much, Madam Dean. An exactly correct introduction to what I want to talk about. Thank you. And I want to thank everyone here at the Jepson School and my friends, especially my old friend Gary McDowell. But I got to be careful what I say about him because he's going to come up at the end and say a few last words. So I can't tell you the truth. Okay, the topic as they gave it to me today is liberal education in non-liberal countries, the promise and perils of trying to set up a liberal arts university in Iraq. Now, oddly enough, I have not only friends here at Richmond, but I have friends also at Hampton-Sydney College, and both places invited me this week to come and speak. And strangely, they both asked me to talk about higher education or Iraq or some combination of them. Now, I didn't really want to talk about that. I really wanted to talk about why, top of my list, why gluttony should no longer be considered a sin, or why God has no interest in recycling, but they said, no, talk about Iraq and higher education. So as Gary will attest, being an obedient sort of person, I said, okay, I'll talk about that. Let me jump into this topic by retelling a story. It's a story you'll find if you, I have a book out there that I wrote after my first tour of duty in Iraq in 2003, 2004. It's retelling a story of something that's in that book and that happened to me back in 2003, 2004. I was at that time stationed in Iraq. I had been sent, as you heard, by the Pentagon to be in charge of helping to rebuild all of Iraq's institutions of higher education. And the universities there were in desperate need of money, not because of the war, but mostly because the looting that took place after the war destroyed virtually every university there, right down to the ground. There was, to be honest, nothing left at most of the universities, not chalk, not chalkboards, not anything. Okay, and while all the 20 or so universities over there wanted to be rebuilt, interestingly enough, some of the universities thought they might want to be rebuilt, not just with the usual Iraqi offerings of engineering, medicine, and science, but some were interested in what we know over here as the liberal arts. I'm not sure they knew what the liberal arts were, but they did know that all the best American universities offered something called the liberal arts, and they thought they'd like to see what the fuss was all about. Okay, so since all the universities were, as I said, in desperate need of money, I found myself back in Washington, D.C., talking to a very unpleasant German lady at the World Bank. She had modest interest in helping the Iraqis rebuild their colleges. But when I said there were 2 or 3 universities there in Iraq that were interested in starting liberal arts programs, she exploded. Oh, great, she said, just what the world needs. Another few thousand unemployed Iraqis. In responding like that, think about it. In responding like that, she wasn't all that far from our common American understanding and our common American response to the liberal arts. Though we tend to be a little less vociferous about it. We all know the question. So tell me, son, so well and good that you're majoring in English or history or medieval poetry, but what exactly are you going to do with that? And for some strange reason, the response, I don't know that, I'm sure something will turn up, never seems to be the right answer. So there was, as you might guess, no money coming to Iraq, to any Iraqi university from the World Bank or the international community or the United States, for that matter, to begin a serious liberal arts program anywhere there. And to be honest with you, there really wasn't that much interest on the part of the Iraqis anyway. What they really wanted was what they had always had, in one way or another, since their own colonial times. universities that concentrated on all the various technical, scientific, vocational, and professional studies. Now, I don't think, and I'm serious about this, that any of us who study the liberal arts should get on our high horse and start looking down our noses at non-liberal arts and sciences, because our non-liberal arts and science brothers and sisters prefer to major in business or computer application or engineering or medicine rather than philosophy or or literature or the classics. I actually think the view that somehow we in liberal education, that we are pure and high-minded, and those who study pharmacy or major in accounting are only in it for jobs and money, is not only silly, but part of the reason why so much of the world thinks of us as snobby and not a little arrogant. You see, it's true in both Iraq as well as here in the United States that those who study non-liberal subjects, everything from engineering and nursing to auto mechanics and agriculture, don't always do it, and don't simply do it for employment or just to have a marketable skill that will make them financially more secure. Sometimes they do it for perfectly sensible and other-directed reasons. We know this. We all know this. We know what public value a good doctor or a good nurse or a good electrician is to society. But let's start at the beginning. What good is a person who knows all of early modern British history to society? Or someone who understands how Twain borrowed from Emerson? Or someone who knows which Latin prepositions take the accusative and which Latin prepositions take the ablative? What good is that person to his country? In other words, while we tend to think that people who study the more useful and not the more liberal arts do it for financial reasons or for employment, the world at large sees people who make and do and invent and produce as of greater value, greater public value, than those who know about the life and times of Emily Dickinson. Just a fact. In a few minutes, I'll actually try to answer that question, the question of what good might a person be to his country who studies the liberal arts and not computer science or nursing. But for now, I only want us to appreciate that the answer the irritating German woman gave me when I visited the World Bank wasn't really a nasty answer at all. It was a way of pointedly asking me, and as in turn I will be asking you, to make a defense of liberal learning that goes beyond sentimental platitudes. Oh, the liberal arts make you well-rounded. French fries make you well-rounded. And try to find out, try to show the value of the liberal arts, not simply to you, but also to your country. I think it's an important question that needs to be asked. So the first thing I was confronted with when I went to Iraq and tried to defend before them the liberal arts was this larger question of public value. I know the value of doctors and nurses, maybe even of lawyers, but what's the value? You're a good audience. You know when I'm being silly. This is good. This is good. But what's the value? Let's say the value to one's country of another person who knows how to quote Milton or who knows all there is to know about Mayan civilization. That's an honest question. And as I say, we have to look at it, and I think we shall. Now, I don't want to leave you with the impression that the various subjects that make up the compendium of the liberal arts don't exist at all in Iraq. That would be wrong. They do have departments of history and literature, foreign languages, and of course have departments of mathematics and the various natural sciences. But no one would mistake these fields there for anything like their counterparts in America. Why? Well, first, an Iraqi student rarely picks what field he wants to major in. What field he will study depends on how smart he or she is, as determined by a test he or she will take as they finish high school. If you score well on the test, let's say you get a 98 or a 99, you will study medicine at the premier university in Iraq, at the University of Baghdad. If you score a little lower, you'll be slotted to be an engineer. A little lower still, and you'll study science or computer science, and so on down the line. If you have truly mediocre grades, you'll wind up in literature or languages, or like me, in political science and peripheral fields like that. What we tend to see as the humanities parts of the liberal arts are not highly valued over there, as they are often, or I have to actually these days say sometimes, over here. And they're not highly valued in part because, well, you yourself might find them interesting, so what? How much real value is there for Iraq or for any other country in that area for a person who knows poetry? How much real value? But more than simply the general inability to pick your own area of study, the idea of breadth of experience that we think is somehow key to liberal learning is honest to God missing over there. Before things got really bad in Iraq in the spring of 2004, I managed to bring one of my favorite professors over here to America to visit a number of colleges and universities. Later, when things got intolerably bad in Iraq, I managed to get him out of the country altogether, and now he teaches here in the United States. He teaches at Duke University. He was a professor of English in Iraq, an absolutely superb English speaker, and he was an expert on T.S. Eliot. But what amazed him about American education was that there was still a belief, though it might be dwindling, that a liberal arts education had more to do with broadening the mind than narrowing it, less with sharpening, as some people say today, as with opening it up. He simply could not understand the insistence at the best liberal arts colleges that English majors also study some science, or math majors be exposed to philosophy or art. Why do people want to dilute their educations by extraneous learning? Or as he put it to me, shouldn't every student want to be an expert? Now, I'm sure it's not true here at Richmond. This impetus to expertise, as I'll call it, is not something foreign in our country either, at least not anymore. I think it's fair to say that the drive to be an expert has overtaken the liberal arts in America too. Take any field, take history, political science, for instance. How often will your major advisor urge you to take the minimum number of courses outside your major so you can take as many courses as you can in your field? How often are the classes within your majors taught so as to make you think like a historian, or teach you all the best techniques of social science research while you're still an undergraduate? How often, that is, do your professors want you not to use your major to illuminate life writ large, but want to use life, your life, to learn to be a historian or a political scientist? I hope not often, but I do know what happens, at least elsewhere. But you see, this is all part of the impetus to expertise that so rules worldwide, an impetus foreign to what the liberal arts at their best once meant. So part of the reasons why the liberal arts are so foreign to Iraq and to most of the Middle East is that they first don't see any public value in them. They don't see what good the liberal arts could possibly be to society. And insofar as the liberal arts give you neither a good, steady job nor make you an expert in any one thing, they're not sure what good the liberal arts are to the student himself. There's a lot more that could be said about the difference between Iraqi education and American liberal arts education that I'll mention, but I won't dwell on right now. Maybe we can later if you want to talk about them. But one glaring difference that I will mention between us is that in Iraq, undergraduate education is not something special, not something prized. It's just one step up from high school. The best teachers, the really great teachers that they might have, don't want to be teaching undergraduates, but graduate students. Professors get paid more. They actually get paid a lot more for teaching graduate students rather than teaching undergraduates. But it's not just the pay. It's connected to expertise and specialization. In graduate school, you can really concentrate. You can become a real specialist, and you can also be the teacher of specialists. The second thing is that the paradigmatic mode of liberal education in this country, the seminar, is totally foreign to Iraq. Sitting around the common table with students and their professor discussing a common text or an important idea, there's historically nothing like that in Iraq. Professors lecture to large, very large classes. You take the best notes you can and you memorize your notes. And you repeat them back verbatim on your tests. If you repeat what a teacher said exactly as he said it, you'll get an A. If you don't repeat it exactly or mess up the words somehow, your grade goes down accordingly. And there's no talking in class, no discussion, no raising your hand to ask a question or have something the professor said clarified. If you want to ask for clarification, you have to see a professor during office hours, and if you really did not get what he was saying, you may be told you need extra tutoring by him, which will cost you extra money. It's a system we can only view from this distance as, to be kind, rather removed from good education and effective teaching. But now in talking about the dislike Iraqi professors have for questioning and for their insistence on exact repetition, I think we're getting a bit closer to an answer to the question of why the liberal arts have had a hard time in places like the Middle East. Here's what I mean. I've talked a bit so far about how the liberal arts, as we understand them in this country, are more or less unconnected from work. They're not the arts of making or doing, but more of thinking and understanding. Okay. That is, you study history to learn about how history can illuminate life. Conversely, you study nursing to become a nurse, to do something. And I've talked about how the liberal arts are more wide-ranging than specialized, more amateur in an old-fashioned sense of that word than expert. But while I've talked about what they're not, I haven't talked about much about what they are. So let's. Now, sure, we can define them in a sense by discipline. Literature, philosophy, classics, languages, mathematics, the natural sciences, history, and so on. If you want to add others to the mix, say anthropology or sociology or psychology or Australian studies, go ahead. We can fight about all that some other day. But what exactly ties all these disciplines together? Yes, as we noted, none of them are like engineering or finance aimed at work exactly. Yes, they're aimed more at just knowing. But knowing what? Is there anything that ties them together with the question, what do they seek to know? A friend of mine, I thought, once cut right to the center of the issue by simply saying that the liberal arts were the search to discover the truth about the most important human issues through reason and reflection. The search to discover the truth about the most important human issues through reason and reflection. So what is it the liberal arts want to know the truth about? How about answers to the questions like, what is friendship? What is love? What should I love, and what, if anything, should I hate? Why do all living things die? What is just? What do I owe my parents? What do I owe my country? Conversely, what does my country owe me? Are some things noble and certain acts disgraceful? What might make something beautiful and other things ugly? Is loveliness or beauty just a matter of taste, or is there really something there? That's a sample, a very, very small sample of what my friend meant when he said the liberal arts are connected with the most important human issues. But notice a few things. None of these are easy questions, and none of them admit of easy answers. And the problem is not that there are no answers to these questions, but that there are many answers to these questions. What is just, for instance? One answer is that justice is fairness. We hear that a lot these days. Justice is fairness, giving equal goods to people because all people are fundamentally equal. But others might say rewarding people on the basis of the work they do is just, and not rewarding everybody equally. But others might say that doing whatever a country or a person thinks is in his or her own interest is what is just, at least for that person. Or perhaps some will say that justice is simply an opinion, that there's no such thing, not really. Or some will say, of course, that justice is whatever God or the Bible or the Quran says to do. So you see, it's not that the answers to the deepest questions aren't available to us, but that there are many answers to these questions, and answers that are so deeply held by some that they will sometimes die and sometimes kill to get their answers across. Now, the liberal arts are not around just to give you a list of the various answers, although sometimes I think insufficient liberal arts teaching used to do exactly that. And nor does it tell you to listen to the biggest or most powerful guy or sect around and do whatever they say. No, it says consider the various answers to the questions you've asked, and consider them by thinking and reflecting. Now, other types of education have many of the same questions. Obviously, if you're studying the question, what is justice, at a very religious institution, or one with a certain political slant, or in Sunday school or in catechism class, you'd learn certain answers to the question. But you'd be given answers to the question from the viewpoint of what your religion or party said was true, or what God said you had to believe. You wouldn't approach the question by surveying all the various answers the best minds had given and thinking about it for yourself. Likewise, civic education, a true kind of education, might bring up a similar question, but it would give you the answer your country teaches, or the answer your country's leaders teach. Now, if you think about it, I think you'll see a further reason why liberal education might have a hard time in Iraq and other places. Liberal education lives in large measure by questioning. It lives on the survey of alternative answers to people's most serious questions, and it considers them, weighs them, and tries to understand them. Especially in tyrannical countries, but also in countries that are authoritarian in other ways, let's say strictly religious countries or patriarchal or traditional societies where the ancestral gives you answers to these questions, liberal education has a hard time getting a foothold. That's also the reason why, by the way, at times, the fine arts, painting, sculpture, wonderful architecture, can flourish in authoritarian nations where liberal arts do not. Now, one limitation of this definition of mine, that the liberal arts are a way of seeking answers to the most important questions through reason and reflection, one limitation it has is that it might tend to make you think that all the liberal arts are really is philosophy. But clearly the liberal arts are more than that. And in fact, some of the alternative answers to some of our most important questions are often best approached through disciplines other than philosophy. Want to know what love is? Literature stands ready to help. Want to know more about what people are like, what human nature might be? History's there to fill us in. In fact, I was once taken aback by a biography of Abraham Lincoln, and I know I'm in the South, but I'm going to talk about Abraham Lincoln anyway, where the biographer said of Lincoln, who never really went to school, but we all know that, but was probably better educated in the arts and sciences than most, if not all of us here, that Lincoln was forever reading novels and plays, and especially poetry. Why? He's going to be a great statesman. What is he reading poetry for? He said, well, the biographer said, he wanted to find in them, quote, patterns of what a man's life should be like. Wow, patterns of what a man's life should be like. But in authoritarian countries, the pattern of what your life should be like is not a matter for you to decide. Not only are you born, perhaps, into a certain station in life, not only are you a member of a family, usually a very extended family, that has expectations of obligations from you, but also, as we've seen, even the career you have. And so the courses you take in high school and then in college are set out for you beforehand, depending on where you slot on your exams. You can't think about what the pattern of your life should be like, or you shouldn't. There's no saying, for instance, I want to become a doctor. I know I do. And even though my grades have not been the best, I will study hard, and I'll try to find the best medical school that will take me. Nope. Not in many places, at least not in the Middle East. Now, however, I have to say because of some things that a few friends of mine and I did. There is an exception to this. One actual liberal arts university in Iraq that we helped start. Remember I said at the beginning that there were a few Iraqi leaders that wanted to start a liberal arts college at their own, as part of their own universities in 2003, 2004. Well, one of them persisted. Rather, it wasn't that he wanted exactly to have a liberal arts college. Rather, he wanted a college that would be an American model institution, one that taught in English and not Arabic or Kurdish, but one that concentrated on business, engineering, and technology. He still had the idea that what his country needed was business people, men and women who knew computer science and computer applications, and who knew how to become engineers, especially petroleum engineers. He wanted people who would become the next leaders of a modern, prosperous, progressive Iraq. But you see, that was our opening, that there. It was exactly the way to have at least an entry into introducing some hint of the liberal arts into Iraqi education. And we did it through that idea of leadership. What do businessmen, which is what he was very interested in, what do businessmen, especially those who deal internationally, need to know? Well, they need to know as much as they can, not only about finance and business and advertising, they need to know economics. Moreover, they will surely need to know something about the history and political structures of other countries, and while they're at it, their own. How about something about the ideas that underlie the major movements in the world that they'll soon be working in? Well, that means knowing something about other religions, other countries' political and moral philosophic outlooks, perhaps even something about their literature. And soon, whether one wants to major in business or computers or engineering, he or she finds himself taking a core of courses in history, econ, philosophy, comparative religion, literature, political science, and so on. On top of all this, the reason to have majors in business, computers, and engineering was to help position Iraq itself as a leader in world affairs, then a new major is called for. A major, let's call it, as we did, international leadership or international studies. Want to have a university that will turn out the next generation of international actors for Iraq? Let's say people who could be Iraq's next ambassador to America or to the UN, or people who can negotiate international treaties and agreements, people who can represent Iraq to the wider world. Then have a truly serious liberal arts major with heavy emphasis on political science and philosophy, world history, and economics. But don't call it a major in the liberal arts, but call it a major in international leadership. You see, and I know that both here and also where I was before this at Hampton-Sydney College, I'm talking to programs in leadership. You see, I can't think of learning leadership apart from learning the broadest sweep of the liberal arts. I know you can be a leader without ever having taken a course in history or economics or other cultures, but you probably can't be a very good one. You certainly can't be a thoughtful one. I was never more certain that we were on the right track than when two students in the program who had just studied Thucydides' history of the war between Athens and Sparta first asked me who I thought was right, Athens or Sparta. But the second question was even more interesting. Dr. John, do you think America is Athens or Sparta? It was at that moment a level of thinking I had rarely seen in 10 years of being in Iraq. But let me say one more thing about leadership in the liberal arts. Think again about Abraham Lincoln. He became a great president and a leader not by studying textbooks on leadership, but by reading the Book of Human Nature and the Book of Human Actions. That is, he did it by reading Shakespeare, the Bible, ancient and modern histories. You see, he didn't just want to know himself and what his patterns of life could be like. He needed to know what others were like. He read Jefferson and the founders to know what America was meant to be. He read literature and poetry so that he would know how to make men listen to him, understand him, and move them to action. It's hard to imagine a greater and more impossible leadership task than leading free people to sing a song that says, "Let us die to make men free," and then so leading them. But notice one thing else, what else was going on in what we did in Iraq. We began with the idea of producing leaders, but it wasn't only or really even to produce great Iraqi leaders, statesmen and ambassadors, for instance, as I said, that we were doing in this program of ours. We're also trying to produce free Iraqi citizens. Graduates who would, of course, become writers or storekeepers or middle managers or whatever, but who would now be thoughtful citizens. Citizens who could, because of the liberal arts, better map out their lives, yes, think about public issues, yes, hold their politicians to account, and give some thought to what others, whether they be political leaders, religious leaders, or even their own tribe or family, might be pushing them to do. In other words, we were trying to make free people out of Iraqis in ways that all the soldiers we sent over, all the parties we cultivated, and all the politicians we supported could never do. Will it last over there in Iraq? I honestly don't know. On one level, I think we did a very smart thing, even though what we did flies in the face of what so many professors of the liberal arts, especially here in this country, think is heresy. We attached the liberal arts to use, to public usefulness. I know that some of you might have this older, more ancient, purer, more philosophic, even Greek idea that the liberal arts are the arts cultivated in leisure and studied for their own sake, not directed at use of any kind. That they are, you might repeat, the liberal arts, not the useful arts. You might repeat the old notion that these liberal arts of ours are tainted when they talk about use or when they try to show what they can do. I'm sorry, I think that view's time has passed. And I think it's no longer supportable. I'm not sure in America, to be honest, it was ever supportable. Why did James Madison, study ancient and modern history, especially the history of ancient confederacies, if not to help shape the Constitution? Why did Jefferson read all of modern political thought of his day and virtually memorize John Locke, if not to give both substance and life to the idea of American liberty? Why did Hamilton immerse himself in all the writers on economics and on human nature, if not better to do his job, running the U.S. Treasury and forming our economic system? I don't mean you should ever believe as a general rule that studying the liberal arts or learning the humanities will make you better in this or that exact field. I doubt if an airline pilot is a better airline pilot because he understands Leibniz. Your doctor, I have to tell you this, is not a better doctor because he taught himself to read Homer in the original Greek. My bet is he'd be a better doctor if he read more medical journals and not Homer. But nonetheless, in some of the biggest jobs, being a parent, being a friend, being a spouse, being a citizen, and being a leader, I do believe that these things we call the liberal arts are of real use and inestimable value. But I've started to lose sight of the question I just asked a minute ago. Will this experiment in liberal education survive in Iraq? I don't know. You see, because the liberal arts not only transmit the culture, preserve the culture, adorn the culture, but also because they hold the culture up for thought, for examination, and for questions, the liberal arts always live in tension with any place they find themselves. Its survival in places like Iraq depends on its being careful, cultivating allies, and doing in large measure what we did over there, showing how the liberal arts are not simply critics, but also can be the helpers, supporters of certain activities that the community needs. Is that a sign I should stop? Now, of course, the question, will the liberal arts survive, can be asked, to be honest, not just about Iraq, but about this country as well. While the liberal arts may surely be of great usefulness in life, and if you're still queasy about using the word use the word that they could be of great value in life. Same thing, just a different word. And since they, not exactly the same thing, but close. But since they almost ever add up to the size of your paycheck, asking students to spend upwards of $200,000 a year, $200,000 for a liberal education, comes close to being a crime. It can't be done. At that price, liberal arts education will dwindle to nothingness. And the sad thing is that it's our colleges and universities, the home of the liberal arts, that are slaughtering the liberal arts. Second, will the liberal arts survive then in our high schools, in prep schools? If you've ever looked at what's generally taught and what's generally not taught in our high schools and the level of training of most of our high school teachers in any liberal subject, you would not even begin to entertain that question. But will the liberal arts survive then in our more elite universities, perhaps like the University of Richmond, or in our more selective, small residential colleges like Hampton, Sydney? Maybe. But don't forget, the liberal arts have always done two wonderful things, and done them simultaneously, even though they seem to be at odds with one another. The liberal arts have been the repository of the greatest thoughts and works of the civilization. And second, they have been the understanders, which implies also being the questioners and examiners of that culture. Both of those things are under attack these days. And under attack not in the culture at large. Citizens don't have that problem, but by and large, under attack in the universities. Any attempt to preserve the culture, to represent, let's say, Western civilization, is met some places with disdain, some places with contempt, some places with just a no. And it's not in the culture at large, but often, to be honest, in our most select institutions of higher learning. And second, any attempt to be the probers of the culture, to ask the hard questions, to defend alternative views is fine, absolutely fine, so long as you're directing your criticism to those on the outside, to America, organized religion, traditional values, but try to be critical of your university's program for social justice, or your peer group's views on gender issues or lifestyles, or your professor's understanding of politics. Well, you might, in some places, find yourself testing the limits of just how far critical thinking will take you. But not here. From all I know, the respect this place has for leadership, for careful and open thought, and for the liberal arts is, to be honest, the real reason I jumped at the offer when I came from Dr. McDowell to come here and be with you this afternoon. Thank you very much.